On this exciting mini-episode, Lois Fenton versus Nadine Marshall. Who you got? It's a special audio edition of my Perry Mason Season 1 Defendants Tournament. Now, on the Perry Pod. Welcome, everyone. I'm your humble host, Jonathan Searcy. Before we move on to Season 4 of Perry Mason, I thought I would finish out our Season 1 Defendants Tournament. The setup, I've put all 40 of Season 1's defendants into a bracket. They're facing off against each other for the crown of Season 1 Defendant Champion. My criteria, pretty simple. Was the defendant memorable? Was the defendant the most memorable guest star in the episode? Slightly different. Did Perry respect the defendant? And finally, do we have any other history with this defendant? You'll see how it works soon enough. Today's matchup features a fan dancer with a thing for horses and a hot cocoa making fiance. It's Lois Fenton from the case of the fan dancer's horse against Nadine Marshall in the case of the demure defendant. Lois has nothing to hide, literally or figuratively. Nadine, she actually confesses to a murder under sedation. This should be a doozy. Category 1. Was the defendant memorable? Lois Fenton, aka Sherry Chi-Chi, memorable? You better believe it.
Just so you'll remember a grateful client, Lois. The real Sherry Chi-Chi.
The only problem, and we'll tackle this later, Lois is constantly in danger of being upstaged by her doppelganger, played by Judy Tyler. When you remember this episode, are you remembering Lois or Sherry Chi-Chi, the actress or the part played? Nadine Marshall suffers many indignities in the case of the demure defendant. That uncle? Eesh.
Smells like you burned it again, as usual. Leave that alone and stop messing around. You don't even make a good maid.
That sister and her lecherous husband, oh boy. And that fiancé of hers with the dopey dad hat? Well, I guess he's not that bad. But add to it, Nadine's actually believing she committed the crime, plus the fact that she's the source of the episode's title. Memorable for sure. Advantage Nadine. Don't underestimate those demure defendants. Category 2. Was the defendant the most compelling non-permanent character in the case? Okay, ask yourself, which is the better part? Lois Fenton or Sherry Chi-Chi? Lois Fenton has scenes in a record shop listening booth. Sherry Chi-Chi gets to give an exercise bike what for while trading entendres with Perry in their tete-a-tete.
Tell me, why did you assume the identity of Lois Fenton as a dancer in the first place?
Oh, you are a question box, aren't you? Well, I have nothing to hide, as you can see.
You realize, of course, there's going to be a lot of notoriety about all this.
Oh, I'm terrified, Mr. Mason. I photograph well.
Add to it Judy Tyler's tragic early death, and you have a recipe for the defendant getting upstaged by the character she gets mistaken for in the episode. Even the cops couldn't tell the difference. Nadine, on the other hand, she's the lead in an episode full of supporting characters. Captain Hugo, love him. But this episode gives us just enough of the salty sailor. The lecherous brother-in-law, well, that personal interview with Perry where he spills the beans is good, but it didn't make him more compelling than Nadine. Again, you can count on one hand the number of Perry's clients who, erroneously, think they actually committed the murder. Nadine is the first.
Uncle Martin! Uncle Martin! I killed him! I killed him!
Advantage Nadine. Category 3. Does Perry respect the defendant? In the case of the fan dancer's horse, we end with Perry watching Lois Fenton do her thing. Plus, Perry cracks the case once he tries to reconcile how the cops say Lois acted with what he knows about her character.
How did you know?
The witnesses said you were sulky the first time they saw you. You told me you weren't. Assuming that you were telling the truth, and they were too, then it must have been somebody else, not you, that they identified the first time.
Perry cares for Nadine.
Now listen to me, young lady. The best medical advice tells us criminal characteristics cannot be inherited.
Nadine doesn't make it to the final scene, though. That's Captain Hugo. You don't know me nothing. I don't know you nothing.
The way I look at it, I'll still come out ahead.
Advantage, a slight edge to Lois Fenton. Category 4. Do we have a prior history with the actor or actress? Susan Cummings, aka Lois Fenton, shows back up in The Case of the Lame Canary, Season 2. Brand new hair, a lot of luggage, and frankly, I wouldn't have recognized her except for the credit sequence. Then there's Christine White, aka Nadine Marshall. She'll show up in 2 more episodes. Once as the defendant in The Case of the Curious Bride, and again in Season 3 as the would-be paramour in The Case of the Blushing Pearls. Advantage, Nadine. Final verdict, the judge finds Nadine Marshall the victor in this head-to-head matchup, though Lois is in the more memorable episode. Congratulations, Nadine! Your prize is a happy marriage to John Locke, long drives in his souped-up Austin Healey, and less family time around Lester and Marion. You're welcome. That does it for this mini episode of the Perry Pod. Keep on walking that Park Avenue beat!